Here.
Chance to review them?
Yes, I did.
Motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? New business, Retail Strategies, LLC. You're on.
Wow. I was going to sit and get my thoughts together. No, that's great. Thank you very much for having me, Mayor and Councilman and the committee. I'm here representing Retail Strategies. As I know you have seen several presentations from other folks that do market analysis, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But what we're really going to talk about is what do you do with it?
Why don't you give your name for the...
Oh, I'm sorry. Chip Rogers with Retail Strategies. I'd introduce myself around except for Councilman Turk, so I apologize for that. So I will get into it. I won't spend a lot of time talking about psychographics and demographics. I will tell you we do it very well. We'll talk a little bit about it, but I'm guessing from the presentations you've seen that you can do some of those things, some of those presentations on your own. So what we're going to talk about today is our process. It's that market research and analysis, but I want to spend much more time talking about strategic planning and the recruitment process. What you will see in the world of economic development, especially in retail, is there are a lot of companies that will come in and provide you information. What do you do with it? Do you have the time? Do you have the expertise? And do you have the relationships to use that information? What we do is very different. We do that implementation for our client cities. So we're going to talk a lot about what that means. What happens with market research a great deal of the time is it becomes shelfware. If you do not have that time, that expertise, and those relationships to implement, you get this nice bunch of answers, but you don't know the questions to ask. So it goes on a shelf, and you pull it off every couple of years. You look at it and go, gosh, that was great. We didn't get any benefit out of that. That's exactly what we want you to avoid, is how do you implement and what do you do with the information once you get that? How do you increase tax revenues? How do you create jobs? How do you improve quality of life? All of those things that come with increased retail. Not only what retailers are you recruiting from outside, but what types of tools and how are you working with local retailers to use this information? So we're going to talk about that. So it's that demographic research, those consumer expenditures that you've seen several times, I'm sure, from other folks. Consumer behavior, so that's psychographic. If you've ever used a credit card to make a purchase, if you've ever purchased a movie on cable or satellite television, if you use a reward card at the grocery store, all of that information is tracked. There are lots of different systems out there for tracking that. Some use Experian. We happen to use one of the standards from ESRI called Tapestry. ESRI is the GIS standard, and it's in use in most cities, and I'm assuming it's in use here, so that data is pertinent. Retail gap analysis. So it's not just here's this raw information and these retailers are going to have to be a fit, but what's going on in the market? Do you have the proper properties for those folks to go to? Do you need to start consolidating properties and compiling those? It's that in-market analysis. So our team spending time here on the ground with your team, helping you understand, and then taking that information forward. So those types of things that you'll see, and we have a little bit of different way to do this. You've seen these numbers, and we're going to look at category and product analysis, so hundreds and hundreds of different products and what is their demand and what is the gap in this market. We look at it a little differently. When we start looking at category demand, one of the things that we're looking for is what is the potential. If that potential is large enough that we can start recruiting outside retailers in to fulfill that, great. But there are also a lot of opportunities for local retailers. So how do we work with them to understand what that opportunity is? And there are thresholds that we want to be looking at. And does it make sense to recruit someone from outside, or does it make sense to work with a local retailer to fulfill one of these gaps in the marketplace? So we're doing all of this. And again, I won't spend a huge amount of time on this because you've seen it several times now. But then the next step we're going through is a little bit different. We're doing a peer analysis. We're going out as part of that and identifying other communities that look like you in the state, in the region, across the country, whatever that area happens to be, to say, what do they have in place in those markets? How many square feet of grocery do they have? So how many square feet of electronics? Is that expenditure comparable? And let's do an inventory of what's in those markets and compare it to the inventory here and also see what's missing. So we're looking at not just that raw data, but also those feet on the street and how does that blend? So what does that real opportunity look like? And then that providing that gap. So what retailers, how many do you need? How many square feet can they support? How much revenue will they generate when we get here? So all of those things that can be done through that data. But then again, you've got the information. What do you do with it? And this is what separates retail strategies from all of, I'm not sure they're even competitors, because what we do is different. We are a full service real estate company. So we are making outbound calls for you. We're putting together your marketing materials. We're putting together your mapping and your aerials. We're doing the surveys and meeting with the property owners, the landowners, the tenant brokers in the market to start understanding what spaces are available for these retailers. So what I will assume others have told you is they're going to provide you all of this information. They're going to tell you who to talk to. We're not telling you who to talk to. We're talking to them on your behalf. We have those relationships. We have that experience. We know what they're looking for. So again, what we don't want is to deliver something that is a nice report that never gets implemented. We're going to implement for you. So that means the key property identification, who are those retailers that we need to be talking to, putting together your marketing materials, and you would think that that would be very easy, but it's not. It's a lot of information. It's pulling out those gems about Joliet or about specific properties in Joliet and making sure those are highlighted in those materials and then putting those in front of those retail opportunities, putting them in front of the developers who are active in the region that maybe are not doing projects here. So having those relationships, and then repositioning, which is a great way of saying redevelopment. It's not all just greenfield. There are probably projects here that are redevelopment projects. So looking at those, where do you start combining and aggregating properties and how to do that? And our team comes in and works with you on the ground to look at those and to make suggestions and put together a retail strategy. So that retail strategy then is the next piece. And how do we get there? So it's putting together a strategic plan. We're going to be talking to these retailers on your behalf. This is what our materials are going to look like. Here is the next step. Here is the types of properties. Here is the landowner or the property owners that we're introducing and providing all of that service, and then also reporting back to you as our client, what are those activities, what are the next steps, what is the progress we're making. So it's market maximization, it's on-demand reporting. So some of the types of retailers we've recruited into markets, again, you've probably seen lots of NASCAR slides at this point, so they're all going to look a little bit the same, but you can start seeing those types of retailers, types of restaurants that we're looking at to come into markets that we have recruited into markets. And then I talked about that reporting. One of the things that I think it's critical for you to have access to is what is the activity going on on your behalf, on the city's behalf? What are the next steps? Who are we talking to? Where do we go from here? This is a living document that sits on you have a password protected website that you can go to this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and see who's being talked to, when was the last time they had contact, what is the next step, what spaces are they interested in, how many square feet are they going to be looking at, all of that information. So if you have a council meeting and somebody says, what are we doing with retail? You have this information at your fingertips to be able to present that to your stakeholders. Another piece of this, as I mentioned, it's not just the retail, and sometimes in retail development, this is even a more exciting piece, is how do we get developers interested in this market? So we have a retailer that comes in and says, yeah, I'm interested in Joliet. Who's going to build my property? So you have to have those relationships, and we have those national relationships with the development community to say, here are opportunities, here are communities we're working with, here is retailers that are interested in that, here are properties that are available for that. So it really becomes that three-legged stool of making all of those introductions, and we're doing that on your behalf. And then that marketing material, so that includes the aerials, going in and doing the market survey and putting all of these materials again. Again, this is something that you wouldn't think is that problematic or it's going to take that much time to do, but it does. Or you have to rely on your GIS staff to pull this. So you're working with them and you're going back and forth, and we're doing this. We do it day in and day out, and this is the type of thing we're pulling together for you. And then that trade show representation. I'm sure you've heard a little bit about the International Council of Shopping Centers and RECon. RECon is the largest gathering of commercial real estate representatives that takes place in the country. It is said that about 80% of every retail deal initiated in the United States in a given year is initiated the third week of May in Las Vegas. It is very important. Unfortunately, it's also a very expensive endeavor to send people out there to make sure that you're having meetings, that there are opportunities being uncovered while you're there. Again, this is something we're doing for you. We're representing. We're making meetings with retailers, introducing your community at RECon. The numbers, it depends on where you're coming from, but it costs between $5,000 and $10,000 once you put travel, opportunity, hotel, registration to send a representative to RECon. It's hugely important, but we're taking care of that cost for you. We're out there representing. Doesn't mean we don't want you to be there. Doesn't mean we don't want you to be at the table, but if you can't, or if you can't justify it, or the budget doesn't justify it, you know that someone is there working on your behalf, and we're doing this. There are regional shows, Retailer One-on-One. There's the Chicago ICSC show, which is a regional show, which is very important because there you get people that are interested very specifically in Chicagoland and what's going on in the market. Not to tout my own resume, I am an ICSC member. I have been for over a decade. I was tasked by the International Council of Shopping Centers to coach cities on how to go out and take advantage of that opportunity at ICSC. I'm very good at it. How do you follow up? What do you do when you're there? Where do you, what types of material are you putting in place? You get interest. What do you do after the fact? We're doing those things for you. And I don't want to keep harping on it, but it is one of the things that separates us from the rest in the market. As I mentioned, that you've seen other online systems. This is where we house your information. It's called Basecamp. It's available to you 24/7, so you can go and pull material that you want to present to an entrepreneur, or you want to pull that report. Remember, we're also working with those local retailers and with your Chamber of Commerce to say, here are opportunities for you. We're in contact. We're on the ground with those. What do you do with this information? Because if it doesn't get used, it's worthless. Plain and simple. I won't spend a lot of time on this. You know what the ramifications are on retail. You get a retail like an Office Depot or a Winn-Dixie that's doing $10 to $12 million a year. You can see what that opportunity does. If you get someone that's a little smaller box like a Tractor Supply or a PetSmart, you can see, and this is based on 2%. I don't think you collect quite that high in Illinois, but that's based on 2%. So what we're doing in the end is really we're asking for a 3-year commitment, like some of our competitors do. The reason we do this, the reason others do this, is retail takes time. Decisions for 2014 have probably already been made, at least for the first 3 quarters of the year. So Q1, Q2, Q3, they're taken care of. So what we want to start doing is looking at Q4, at 2015 and 2016, because that's really where the rubber meets the road. So what we're going to do in year 1 is all that initial research, that market analysis, the demand reporting, market and trade area consulting. We're going to be here on the ground with you. We're going to catalog the properties. We're going to identify those retailers that need to be recruited, developers that need to be recruited in the market, and we're going to represent you at the trade show. We're going to start making that outbound call. We're going to be sending emails to retailers that are a fit. We're going to be sending them marketing materials. We're going to be blogging, all of those things that come with it. You're assigned a staff person to do that. Year 2 and year 3, what we're doing is updating every year, complete update of all of those materials and continuing that representation. So you know, the first year, the commitment is $50,000. Second year is 25, third year is 25, and it stays at 25 as long as you stay with us. So we're always doing those things on your behalf for $50,000 first year. And that's really where our hard costs were, that initial, the database development, all of those things, and then the rest is maintenance of that. So I will tell you, there is a continuum for retail development, and it starts with understanding the opportunity, it starts with understanding the demand, and it ends with opening a store. Others in this space do this blue dot, and it goes from understanding the opportunity, doing the research, and identifying those prospects, and then they come to you and say, here you go. Go start calling these people. Who's going to do that? When are you going to do that? How often are you going to do that? What materials are you going to put in front of them? We're doing the marketing, making those outbound calls, representing you at trade shows, doing the follow-up, through the letter of intent, real estate committee, through contract, negotiation. One of the things that we do is if a retailer came in and they were asking for some incentive, and you thought as a board or as a council that it made sense to offer those incentives, we can do that incentive development, the negotiation, all of those things for you, because again, we're a full service real estate company. There is an additional fee to do that, and it's outlined, but there is the potential to do that if it makes sense. We put it out there because it does come into play, especially based on what retailer and then that store opening. So retail strategies encompasses that entire continuum of the development process.
Couple questions.
Yes, sir.
One, you already answered, what does your firm offer over and above the other ones we talked to? Incentives. It's $10,000 per project or $250 an hour. Is that locked in, or could the city sit down and work out an incentive with a client or somebody that's interested in coming to the city?
No, the city can do it. Okay. If you have legal, you don't have to use us.
Okay, we can sit down and say, okay, what's it going to take to get you here?
And those would be done as scope addendums. It would be, you know, a separate agreement.
Okay.
And again, if you look at that, it's kind of a lump. If you want to go $10,000, that's 40 hours. That's a man week. Right. Not a bad price to do that because you're probably going to go over that. But if you just wanted us to come in and say, we've put together an incentive, or we want you to consult on that, we'll do that at that rate. So.
And lastly, right now the City Center Partnership is in the process of hiring a downtown development. They've had 12. They put out RFPs. They got 12 people interested. They got it narrowed to 6. They're going to narrow it to 2 or 3, and eventually hire a company to come in and develop downtown.
Yes.
How would you dovetail with them once they are hired?
Very closely. We would want to be a true partner with them. So we would want to be working with them, understanding the opportunity, understanding what materials, what retailers they're looking at, what are the local opportunities through that, and what that development project looks like. So we would want to be very close with them. If you weren't that far along, we may have entertained a development project or introducing our partner firms to it, but you're too far along for that. But we would want to be involved in that and at least have that relationship so we're all on the same page. The last thing you want them doing is a development that in no way, shape, or form is it fitting kind of the recruitment plan that you've got going on for the market. They need to be dovetailed.
Anybody else? Larry.
Yeah, I have some questions. Thanks. Sure. Real quick, you ran past it. Maybe I'm the only one not familiar. You mentioned GSRI,
ESRI.
ESRI, and you said that that's kind of necessary, but that most communities are involved. Are we involved?
Yes.
You have ESRI? Yeah.
I wanted to, what is ESRI? What is it?
It's Environmental Sciences Research Incorporated. It's the largest provider of mapping software and databases. They're kind of the industry standard. Unfortunately, for a strange reason, a lot of companies that do the type of work we do use other brands, but we're an ESRI shop.
Okay.
We are too, right, Ken? We use the,
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a great question. That's good. I need to remember as I'm doing the presentation to explain that. Yeah.
That's it. I might be the only one in the room that didn't know.
No, I bet you're not.
Chip, what would you do to try to prohibit us from basically winding up going through the whole process, rearranging the deck chairs and cannibalizing existing retailers?
And this is not just with retail strategies. I think this would be with anyone. You control the process. Who are we going after? We want you to go after this retailer. We don't want you to go after this guy. And there are all kinds of reasons. There could be political reasons. There could be development reasons. There could be initiatives going on. So you're in charge of that process.
Well, my question is, do you have any process or any way to try to help advise us on, well, you know, this one here might just be cannibalizing what these companies already have. They're not bringing something new to the table.
Yes. And that is why we're going through all of that gap analysis in advance to make sure that it does not make, and this is not just retail strategy, this is going to be anybody you talk to, it makes absolutely no sense to go recruit yet another pizza restaurant if you've got 100. Hey, in some markets you say we can bring a pizza restaurant here and people are jumping up and down, that's great, they don't have one, but that's part of that process. And again, remember, we're coming and spending time here with your team. What makes sense? What are our goals? What are our initiatives? What makes sense to us?
And what we tend to find out, and you see a lot of conversation about this in the media or what have you, or just generally in the public, where they might say, look, if you look at the Macy's, as an example in Joliet, now certainly that's a corporate decision, but what help can we get? You know, what happens with a lot of the existing retailers, especially national, what we have, is that a lot of consumers in Joliet think they're underserved or you know, misjudged. Why do I go to Bolingbrook and Fox Valley and see 3 or 4 and 5 times the choice? Right. Can you help in that regard?
Well, certainly. And I think I think it's the first piece of it, and you will see this. The first piece is you adopting this retail mentality. We're going to do the right things to get opportunity here for our residents. The second piece is cannibalization. Does it make sense for retailer X to come here if they have a store in Bolingbrook? We're going to have to look at that through this process. We don't have all those answers, unfortunately. I don't in the top of my head. We're going to come and have to look at that, what makes sense, and then what is that demand? Can we support that in this market? You know, we'll hear a lot of times, I did a project several years ago in Virginia, and the mayor came to me and she said, you know, if we don't get a Neiman Marcus, I'm not going to be happy. And the unfortunate truth is, unless she was going to go to Neiman Marcus every day with 250 of her friends and spend $1,000, Neiman Marcus was going to fail if it did come to the market. They would never make that decision. So those are the types of things that we want to go in and look at, is what are those opportunities? What can we support? What makes sense? How do we elevate what we're getting to satisfy that demand?
Okay, and should we as a council decide at some of the trade shows, conventions, that we did want to send a representative? We sent Mike out there. Would you accommodate that and at that conference and bring him to the meetings where you're discussing this?
Oh, certainly. Yes, 100%. Come on, Councilman. Yeah, I think it's, again, you don't have the expertise, you don't have the relationships, and you don't have the time to set those appointments up. It is not an easy task. People will start setting appointments for that meeting that happens the 3rd week of May. Probably in the next week or two, people's calendars are going to start getting booked up. So we're going to be doing that. If you come in mid-April and go, just decided to go to Vegas, you're going to go out there and walk the floor for 2.5 days without a lot of productivity. Doesn't mean I don't want you to go, because you're going to learn a lot while you're out there. But what we want to make sure you're doing is having productive meetings and with those opportunities.
Right, because I mean, you know, in my experience on trade shows as well, a lot of people don't realize you don't get to have an open-ended 2-hour, 3-hour, 4-hour. You're broken up in 15-minute, half-hour, maybe hour if you're a large client.
Yeah.
And so you better have the right questions, and that certainly would be the expertise we've been looking from you. But we might have full faith in Mike to go there and observe, to keep you up for the city interests.
We would love to see any of you out there. So, yeah, and remember, we have a booth and we're setting those appointments, and we have the expertise at the table, and we're presenting that.
And certainly prior to that, and several months prior, we might as a council say, can you know, we'd like you to look at the demographics and the marketing demographics for company A, B, and C, and can you set up an appointment to talk to them, because we'd like to try to attract them.
Yes.
Even if it's outside the purvey of the list that you already gave us. Certainly.
Yeah, we can do that. The challenge becomes you better have something pretty compelling when you get in front of them, though. Their time is very limited, so if you go and say, we want to meet with you, there needs to be a message with that.
And which you would help us
Yes.
forge. Now, just the last couple of things. Certainly, everybody knows the U.S. economy is 70% consumer spending, unfortunately. We want commercial, we want industrial. That's my next question. If we were to retain you, are you aware of similar types of companies that would do what you're doing for the retail side, that would do commercial/industrial?
There are companies that do site selection services on the industrial manufacturing. Unfortunately, I don't have relationships with them, and I couldn't tell you the names of the companies off the top of my head. There are companies out there that do that. You know, I think that's, again, they're doing the consulting. We're, you know, for you to do that, but I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
You know, if I may, along those lines, we have a company that's doing that right now. It's
Okay.
called Centerpoint Properties. They have that out there, and you know they're out there looking to bring in big box buildings and jobs
Yeah.
and so forth
Yeah.
and so on. Now, there are other areas where there's property that we could work on to bring them in, but you know Centerpoint Properties.
Right.
is
And they got their own economic development director as well. They're doing bang up out there for that.
Yeah.
But that's within the
Right,
purvey.
what's in there, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Last question. Obviously, you know, you would be comfortable giving us some references that would be positive.
Oh, certainly.
Would you be comfortable giving references that were negative? I'm assuming nobody bats 1,000.
If
I learned
I wouldn't, I don't mind. I don't know that,
those cities might want.
I don't know. We'll give references. They say what they will. You know, most companies are not in business of giving out negative references. I don't know. This is going to sound terrible, and I apologize. This is sounds like a sales guy's, but I don't know that we have any. We do a pretty good job. Again, what happens is cities get research done, and that's where your negative references come from. It's not cities that were successful. It's the ones that got the information and never did anything with it. You know, I worked for Buxton for 10 years, and I'm changing the subject a little bit. Those that were successful with Buxton were very, very successful. Unfortunately, there are a huge number
Sad on it.
that sat on the information and never did anything with it. That's not Buxton's fault, but it's that implementation. So I don't want to avoid your question. I don't know that we have anyone that would say we didn't implement for them. So,
Like,
yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, just got, you mentioned the show in Vegas, as you said, in May, the shopping center show.
Yes, third
Now,
week of
some
May.
years ago, some staff people from the city of Joliet went out to that and actually came home with a development, and it went so far as to purchasing property and closing on the property, and within months of that closure, the economy took a dive and nothing happened, you know. So my question is, if your firm is successful, or any firm, what was the time frame that we have to have somebody on board to take advantage of this show in May, to get advantage of this year's instead of waiting a whole other year?
Yeah. Our deadline is March 1st.
Okay.
For you to have full implementation services, our deadline is March 1st. Doesn't mean we can't expedite getting the research done and starting to make calls. We could, but again, the reality is by end of March, early April, those retailers are and those developers are pretty well booked. So we're coming back at March 1st.
Okay, thank you.
anything else? Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Chip,
Thank you all very
good,
much.
Very good. I like the part where you take it one step further. You're right. If you can get all the information you want, if you sit on it, it's no good. So, thanks again, Chip.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Scott? Sure.
Feel okay? Another meeting at 6. Who is it? Okay, so Mike's got to go to finance at 6.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I've been on your agenda for a few months and have been
You're
subsequently
persistent. We kept putting you on.
pushed
but
a
you're
couple
persistent.
times, you know.
Oh, wait, Mayor, we gotta end the meeting like that. I got some more. Sorry, Scott.
But I'm very glad to be here. This is probably going to be a little bit of a different flair on some of the things you've been hearing about economic development, because the genesis of what I'm about to talk about came out of our technology world, sponsored by the CTIS committee, in fact, related to master fiber planning for the downtown Joliet area and then subsequently for the broader Joliet area. So essentially, you know, during the fall, Mr. Thanis asked me to present this material to the Chamber of Commerce and to the City Center Partnership, and then subsequently to this group, because what we found is, as we started to investigate the details of what kind of things could be possible if we had a higher speed, lower cost communication capability within our city, that the natural outcome of that was the possibility for some economic development. Not necessarily, you know, bringing in retailers, but bringing in commercial interests that might have a need to do higher speed communications. I'll give you a flavor for what I'm talking about here. So we launched this project, you know, at the end of last summer with Northern Illinois University, and that led to, you know, a lot of interesting, you know, discoveries on this stuff. And while you know, our main driver was to connect up this campus here, the police station and City Hall, with our new transportation center because of all the surveillance activities going on there. It led to a much broader opportunities that could span the entire downtown area, including the Will County stuff. So let me begin. So what is this project about? Starting off with a comprehensive understanding of business communications within Joliet. And then that led us to a gap analysis. So are we underserved? Are we overserved? Are there any real opportunities? And then really the definition of what we're after, as I mentioned, is really lower costs and higher speeds, because as you start to, you know, integrate video surveillance to the tune of over 100 high definition cameras at a transportation center, that leads to real high bandwidth requirements, and you need the capacity in your networks to be able to do that. So for public safety reasons, that's why we, you know, went down that path. And why is it necessary? So we've got a significantly a significant growing demand in Joliet, not just for our needs, but all over Will County especially. Need for lower costs and better value. The drive for economic development was really the interest that caused us to, you know, to want to bring it forward here. We ended up partnering with Northern Illinois University. They are right now interviewing what we're calling constituents, like the school districts, the high school district 204, the grade school district 86, all of the Will County interests, and Will County 911. All of them have high-speed communication requirements. All of them have expressed interest in jumping on board our project if we're able to take it forward.
And Scott, you're referring to the downtown only?
No, I'm actually referring to the broader Joliet. So
Citywide?
I'll give you a sense for
Are
the concept.
they also interviewing Plainfield school districts, Troy school districts?
Yeah, Troy's 30C, Down White.
Plainfield?
Yeah, they've got, part of that's in Joliet, part of it's in Plainfield. They're very interested in discussing this with us. They're very technology savvy. They've done a lot of great stuff, but they have growing needs as well. It's estimated that, within the next 5 to 10 years, that the student requirement in our classrooms is going to, for every 1,000 students, it will exceed, using technology terms here, 1 gigabyte of capacity to the internet. So the growth is becoming exponential. A lot of that is driven by video, and video is very expensive in terms of the amount of capacity that it needs to do the work. So Northern Illinois University broadband team has helped Illinois communities acquire over $120 million in grant-funded fiber initiatives over the past, X number of years. And the interesting part about this, there's a series of organizations that they've helped, including the South Suburban Mayors and Managers Association. And if you really plot Joliet in here, we're really surrounded by it. And so I don't really understand why Joliet really never dove into this in the past, but I do know that they didn't, and that as a result of that, communities all around us throughout Illinois have leveraged and taken advantage of these things, and Joliet is smack dab in the middle, and we're now in a place where we're playing catch up. We believe we have an opportunity to correct that, and we believe that not only will it serve the needs of Joliet and interconnecting our locations and help our constituents like Will County connect their locations and our schools connect their locations, but also it can lay a foundation for commercial interests, especially since we have the world's largest inland port, the Centerpoint Intermodal, just a couple of miles to the south. And I'll show you how we do that. So why here and why now? Large concentration of requirements, especially in city center. When I presented this to the City Center Partnership Board, it sparked a lot of interest, and that's what led to the interest by the Chamber of Commerce and Russ Slinkard, and also led Tom to ask me to bring this forward here from an economic development bent as opposed to a technology bent. There's very significant growth expected in Will County. If you look at the Chicagoland, the greater Chicagoland, a huge a part of that growth is coming in Will County. And that's going to lead to not only where, people and where they live, but also businesses that they work at and that serve them. I'll show you some of that as well. Based on a report in the Herald News last year, the population growth for Will County is expected to reach 1.2 million by 2030. That's a 77% growth from 2010. And is Joliet positioned properly right now to be able to be a target location for commercial businesses and for people to live and to be able to get the kind of services that they need? Now, I'm not standing here telling you that that a fiber infrastructure is the number one thing that's going to make something like that happen. But what I am saying is that it is becoming table stakes that you have to have this type of capability in your community, or you simply don't make the short list for organizations considering where they're going to go when they want to move. So who's going to find this attractive? Well, we certainly know the public sector, because we've got a lot of locations that we today connect up with wireless, and it works okay. The capacity is pretty good, and we can actually buy more and get more speed, more capacity. Each time we upgrade, it costs more, et cetera. But we have significant government anchors downtown. We've got 10 or so locations. Will County's got 10 or so locations. They've got a strong requirement to connect all those together. Today they're paying organizations like Comcast and or AT&T or whatever, and or wireless organizations where they connect them together. And on top of that, you layer in our educational institutions and the possibility for commercial interest. As I mentioned, we think that organizations like logistics command centers, given the intermodal just south of here, might find a good office location in downtown Joliet very attractive if they're basically managing logistics in and out of the world's largest inland port. Business contact centers, software development firms, healthcare providers, technology hosting centers. These are the types of businesses. These are not retail, right? I mean, these are places where our young people coming out of school need to go to work, and where do they go? Because these businesses don't exist here. They go to Chicago or they go outside of the state. And what makes us an attractive destination? Well, that growth I'm talking about, right? So what are we going to do to attract, what's going to be attractive about us, that's going to make a business want to come here and make people want to live near the businesses that they work at? The advantages in city center include low occupancy. There's a lot of available office space. There's a low cost per square foot. If you compare that to Greater Chicago, I think we've got some pretty affordable office space. We've got local education feeder institutions right in the neighborhood. So we got qualified labor if we work with them to prepare our students to be able to come to work for the businesses that we've got here or are trying to attract to come here. We've got low-cost labor. I don't think it's any secret that Joliet isn't leading the way in terms of wages in Chicagoland. So we've got an affordable labor pool that is attractive to people wanting to plant their business here. So if they're qualified, if they're educated, and if they're affordable, those are some pretty significant advantages. And we've got presently a propensity for business tax incentives. Sitting here in the last few years and listening to the council, debate about who do we give incentives to, why do we give incentives, we know that we've given incentives, and this is another place where we could possibly incent an organization to come here for, to perhaps be, an incubation point for a couple of different types of businesses that don't work out of here right now. I've mentioned again the proximity of the world's largest inland port. And then finally, if we have low-cost, high-bandwidth business communications, we don't have that today. If we do have that tomorrow, that's just one more feather in your cap as you look to entice an organization to plant their commercial headquarters or that type of business here. And I would go further and say that, so I'm a Joliet guy. I have lived here most of my life, but most of my career I've worked outside of Joliet because in my discipline, in my field of expertise, I've had to go to Chicago in order to get the kind of job that was specific to the skills that I have and the salary that I needed, et cetera. And my kids are now going to school, and some of them are out of college and they're landing in places, and one's working in Chicago, and the second one's working in Chicago, and one's a fireman, God bless them, and teachers, and they're around here. But these are the kind of things that I think, in working in concert with higher education in our town, to prepare our people to get to be able to go right to work for the kind of organizations that you strategically are trying to attract into our community. And I'll hit on that logistics thing again, because why would we not want to have, why aren't we the leading logistics educator in the country, given where we're at right now? I think I've heard you talk about maybe we're 15 to 20% built out. That organization is going to continue to flourish, and it's going to continue to expand. And do we have the people that, it's one thing to go to work in the warehouse and move the product around. It's another thing altogether to be on the corporate side of that equation, where our college-educated students are out there, in fact, working closely in those organizations to help them manage those processes and not have to take off and leave our town. I call the city center the downtown business grid. So you've seen this before. It's on the city center's website. That is the entire downtown area. We are in the lower left-hand side of the map there. If you plot the city of Joliet locations that we have downtown, that's where they're at. If you lay on top of that the Will County, is another 9 buildings that they've got that they interconnect today. If you put the IDOT locations, and I'll add a little bit on the IDOT discussion in a minute, but those are the bridges where they've got bridge tenders, and they're working on a technology-based labor concentration project right now that I know that you guys are aware of. And then you lay the schools in, so Joliet Central and the new downtown Joliet Junior College Center. Now that's all interesting, and it looks like a pile of mush, but if you really look at it closely, there's some interesting intersects here. So the first one, just connecting City Hall to the Transportation Center. This is a required part of the Transportation Center project. that's, us allowing our police force to have access to the 100-plus high-definition cameras that are down there. So we're going to have to do this regardless of what we do. And as I mentioned, that was the thing that sparked the thought process that said, hey, maybe this is bigger than just us connecting up our, these campuses. If you go up and down Chicago Street, and, one of the topics that I continue to be a part of discussions is that, we want Chicago Street to run straight through from 80 all the way to the north side of downtown. That's great, because what that means is they got to open up the road. They're going to eliminate a parking lot. They're going to, widen the road a little bit and to re-landscape the whole thing. What that means is they're going to open up the road, and when they open up the road, it gives us a perfect opportunity to lay our own fiber in the ground. And if you look at the J's and the W's up and down Chicago Street, you can see it's not a short, it's nothing more than a short hop to connect those locations together. The cost difference for us, when a trench is there to put fiber in the ground, is about $5 per linear foot. Without it, as is the case between here and the transportation center, and you got some bedrock in the ground, you're looking at something in the neighborhood of $200 per linear foot. So what we're proposing is that essentially, let's not go after something like this all right away really fast. You do it when you have the opportunities. When you're opening up the road, Joliet should have the right of first refusal to drop fiber in the ground for our own interests. And then we can do that at a very low cost, and then we can leverage that to connect whatever we want up on that. What I just laid out there now is that the Illinois Department of Transportation project to consolidate bridge tenders and to basically implement a technology-based management solution, they want to put up to 12 high-definition cameras on every bridge and consolidate their bridge tenders from where they've got one person 24 hours a day at every bridge. They want to take them and put them in a consolidated place, which happens to be on Jackson Street, just to the west of the river. And they're going to operate 24 hours a day in there. And they're going to do it all with technology. So what we said is, we have cameras on all those bridges. And what we came, I went and met with them and basically said, hey, look, we could actually just remove our cameras from that if you would allow us to basically tap into your video feeds. So we have an opportunity to basically jump on board with them. They're planning to put fiber up and down the river from as far north as Ruby Street to as far south as Brandon Road. In essence, covering the entire, from the far north of downtown all the way to the south, which gets you over by the intermodal, which gets you over by the racetrack, possibly, and things like that. So if we were to, build in stages and build up our downtown area, we believe we can implement something that would allow us to be able to connect these locations without, essentially this is kind of future-proofing. These types of investments can last as much as, in excess of 30 years. And the stuff that changes is the electronics on the endpoints. So what you put in place today can communicate across a fiber, but a year, 2, 3 years from now, there's a new generation of those things that uses the same fiber but can communicate at 10 times the speed. So you could do that with AT&T or Comcast or any other carrier, but when you want to go from one speed to another, then you have an incremental cost associated with that. In this case, you basically wouldn't have to bear that cost. We're thinking that essentially we have the opportunity to share some of these costs and to work with NIU to identify grant funding sources that could help fund and getting some of this off the ground. The possible phases: phase 1, just to the transportation center. Phase 2, our sites in City Center, Will County's sites in City Center, and I have met with Will County. They're very interested in this. They understand the benefits from their perspective, and they're interested to the point where they want to talk about, shared costs, and, they're not basically saying just give it to us or anything like that. So there's opportunities, and then obviously the IDOT Bridge Control Project. Phase 3 could be the School District 204, the high schools. Joliet Junior College is kind of in and around this stuff, also working with Northern Illinois. They have interest in getting out to what's called Internet 2, next generation internet, extremely high capacity, higher education being delivered over the wire, that kind of stuff, access to an incredible amount of educational content, and then finally city center commercial interests. So there may be other interests in downtown Joliet that could jump on board of this because they have a need to connect two locations or connect from one place to another or get to the internet if we so elect to do that. Finally, phase 4, which gets us out of the downtown area and School District 86. I think, and if you really are honest and you look at it, education is very much embracing technology. Students in Joliet high schools are getting laptops and tablets as they walk in the door as a freshman, and that trend is not going away. All of those things need to intercommunicate. They got to get access to the databases that the school has. They got to get access to the internet. They do that through these types of networks. And then, but basically in phase 4, we would then extend our network to the far west side and the possibility of interconnecting, all of the, intermediate level schools in addition to the high schools. So this would be something that we could adopt as a strategy. We're going into strategic planning, and this is something that could actually be a long-term benefit for a lot of interests in our city and helping prepare our young people for the future. So where do we stand today? We've completed a preliminary design. So we've plotted on a map, basically, all of the points where all of our constituents are. We know specifically where all the school locations are at every level. We know where our, we're using that ESRI, Larry, mapping stuff to plot all of our government anchors and other potential constituents. And we've, through the resources of Northern Illinois University, come up with a network design that is feasible. And from there, it's about developing cost estimates. So, what is this thing going to cost? Well, number one, it's not cheap. It's a lot cheaper if you do it in phases with, when Public Works is opening up the roads. So as a corollary here, what we've done is, and I've had some initial discussions with, with our Public Works people and with our legal department about why not let's take a look at our ordinances to make sure that Joliet has the option of putting this stuff in the ground as part of our ordinance, that we get the right of first refusal to do that when they open up the road. I'm told that other communities have already done that. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the state of Illinois is already doing it. And, as I said, from $200 per linear foot down to $5 per linear foot, there's a huge benefit by just basically building it as you can and then bringing it to the locations where you need it. Identifying potential grant sources. A number of years ago, when money was flowing and Illinois wasn't in the condition that it is right now, there was a lot more grant money available. But I am told that there is still grant money available. And so NIU is going to work with us to try to identify some of those to help further possibly reduce our costs in this arena. And then finally, Joliet is a municipality, and we provide all kinds of services to the community. We're not a network services company, and I'm not standing before you telling you I think we should become a network services company. I think it makes sense for us to do some of this and to perhaps own that infrastructure, but probably better to let somebody else manage and run it, because every time somebody's digging up the road, you got to do locator services. Every time there's a break of any kind, you got to repair it. And we are not staffed, nor do I think we probably should be staffed to do that kind of a thing. So we're looking at potential network management organizations that could do that kind of stuff as a fee. It becomes a part of the total cost of doing something like this. So I'm near the end here, but essentially, Joliet is really the city of fast cars with the racetrack, fast trains with the high-speed rail, and now fast business. Some success stories just in Illinois who've leveraged this kind of stuff over the past 10 years. The city of Kankakee, Rockford, Naperville, Aurora, Elgin. Elgin did something interesting with what they call the Elgin Technology Center, the South Suburban Managers and Mayors Association, and all these others as well, not to get into all the details. But what are our next steps? We're going to continue to basically work with NIU. We're going to continue to flesh out what some of our options are and get to the heart of what our costs would look like. And continue to collaborate with our government anchor agencies. Now, like I said, Will County's the biggest in the neighborhood, and they're very interested in this, and us. So we're the two anchors, and then everybody else is more peripheral. But collaboration with higher education. If we move something like this ahead, then we really need to sit down with St. Francis and Lewis and Joliet Junior College and say, hey, we're trying to prepare people, we're trying to attract this type of business. They're going to hire this type of people. What are we doing to prepare logistics experts, et cetera, for our community? And on the bottom there, perhaps it makes sense for us to participate in developing what I would call a think tank, similar to the Elgin Technology Center. So as an example, if we do move this forward, and if we do get the downtown area sort of lit up, why not let's then make a Joliet Technology Center and have it serve the downtown area? Perhaps it's a public-private partnership that could actually, help, incubate small business, et cetera. That's really all I had. I think it's an exciting thing. Like I said, it's something that was, started out at technology and then became something a little bit different, and which is why I was asked to kind of bring the same message here. And it's just an idea, but it is, it's something that I think is worth continuing to pursue until we get it fully costed out, until we outline really what the benefits are, and you decide either that makes sense or it doesn't.
I'm sure everybody has questions, but I know Mike's got a finance committee meeting. Maybe shoot the questions to Scott, and he can answer. And Jim, maybe you, whatever report you have, shoot us an email.
Okay.
Okay?
Sure.
Because they do
One
have a...
quick one.
Sure. Go ahead.
Jim, if you could, and this comes from constituents too, and actually I didn't expect it tonight because you already have your report, but we'd really like to know, what are we doing to try to massage the situation with the vacant My Gopher, the mall outlets, like where they, tore down the, of course, these are private decisions, but we can certainly accommodate, and the Dominick's on Essington, where
Maybe
we're going with that.
I can answer. The My Gopher, we've met with someone. They are that close to signing a lease.
You know what kind of business, not who?
Yeah, I
Commercial,
can tell you.
retail?
I can tell you that they don't want to release it. I can tell you that in privacy.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. But if you want to address the other ones, so.
Yeah, the only one we're not sure of is the grocery store, but we did get a contact through the mayor's office from another mayor from another town, so we know who to talk to. We haven't done that yet. And then what was the other one that,
Just
the outlets?
The outlets, like
Yeah.
where they took down the old theaters and
Right.
stuff, and is there any assistance we can give as a development department to the mall to try to attract?
And we're trying to attract them. The problem we're having with the national tenants that we're dealing with, they want to be on US Route 30, and they look at the Movies 8 site as being sort of backwater, even though we can prove to them that traffic counts are higher than they are at the entrances that are on Route 30, but it's a constant struggle.
If I may address that to Councilman. We have a very popular restaurant that's interested. We talk to people from the mall. They want that restaurant attached to the mall. This restaurant wants to be out in one of the outlets, so we're trying to work something.
Negotiate that.
Yeah.
And then the last thing then, kind of what Chip had said, they're out there and he didn't have the information. Can we start looking for something similar to what we're exploring for retail, for the commercial, industrial, as far as the consultant? We'll get our feelers out. Chip was saying earlier, yeah, there's companies out there that do that. Off the top of his head, he couldn't, think of one that's a separate, he's doing, his company does the retail.
On the industrial side, we have a long list of people that we've dealt with that have been in this community, have done projects in here, and they're world-class international industrial developers. And we know them well, and we deal with them on a regular basis.
So what I'm saying is we're trying to attract retail. Shouldn't we also be trying to get some help in attracting commercial and industrial?
On the
Outside of the
industrial.
sign point, of course.
Yeah, retail and industrial, but yes, we are.
And commercial, generally.
Yeah.
B1, B2.
Yes.
And how are we doing that then? We have a consultant already that I'm unaware of?
No, we do not have a consultant, but we know all the developers, and we know the properties that we have available, and they know us, because they're all trying to get end users in there just as hard as we're trying to get end users in there.
All right, well, maybe we can prepare a report on that at some point.
Okay.
Okay. A motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Scott, thank you. Very good.
Thank you.
Very good. Yes.
Thanks, Scott.
What-
It's